Since I'm waiting for my game room to be moved, I essentially want to do more topic videos. And so for this one, I'd like to talk about Ubisoft and how they're basically public enemy number one. In an interview with GameIndustry.biz, Ubisoft's director of subscriptions, he literally said something along the lines of players should get used to not owning their games. And I don't know about you, but I'm not okay with it. And I think that this is a discussion worth having. And honestly, I think it goes well beyond Ubisoft. Now, to stick to topic on this one, Ubisoft is going to be the primary focus, but I do want to talk about what are our rights as gamers and how is this going to affect us and what should we be doing. But Ubisoft has done a really good job of pissing off people on a pretty regular basis. So in the spirit of changing things, let's start with voting with your wallet. Voting with your wallet is going to be very important over the next few years, and although I do not think we're going to be able to stop a lot of the things that are already happening or have already happened, I think it's going to be very important to vote with your wallet and make sure that you're only buying from companies that you actually want to support and not the people that are peddling a bunch of shit. I understand that Ubisoft is not the only problem here, but I wanted to talk about some of the practices that they've done to basically put them on my shit list. Microtransactions and in-game purchases, I personally despise. I don't buy a lot of games with those things in them. In terms of cash grabs, this might as well be like the Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Valhalla, and numerous in-game purchases like currency packs, cosmetic items, and the worst to me is the time savers. And apparently in the middle of the game, it almost seemed like the game was being dragged on a little longer than maybe it should have been, making it extremely grindy. And so later on in the game, you're able to basically buy something that's called like time savers, where you buy currency that's like a helix or something like that with your own personal money. And then it will help you like progress through the game faster than it would otherwise, which that is scummy. You should not have to buy anything to make your gaming experience like better. Like, because it almost seems like they did this on purpose to be able to sell that to people, and that's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to produce garbage to get people to buy stuff to fix it. I mean, that's like Skyrim relying on modders to fix the game, which they did. One of my least favorite things about online gameplay is pay to win. Now, that used to be a pretty more common terminology back in the day, I feel like. But in terms of like the pay to win thing in like Ghost Recon, which was another Ubisoft franchise, Ghost Recon Breakpoint was giving players like a microtransaction system where it included like weapons, upgrades, cosmetics, but even in-game resources that could be bought with real money, giving players significant advantages over others. Another example is they did basically something where it was like a case of FOMO, fear of missing out. And so with Assassin's Creed Origins, they had items that were locked behind a paywall, but worse yet, it was under a time limit. So you could only get like exclusive items with those like Helix credits I was talking about earlier with real money, but you had to buy it within a certain period of time. Otherwise, you just missed out on it completely. The same thing with early access, giving people who are willing to pay more for an upgraded edition and to have to pay for more, like in Far Cry 6, where unless they got the upgrade, it felt like you weren't even getting the complete game. I mean, I think that Ubisoft, more specifically the Assassin's Creed series, is very well known for the bugs that they have in their games. Ubisoft pretty regularly seems to be releasing games that have just bugs in them and crashes and things like that. Like Assassin's Creed, I think it was infamous for that like face glitch where you can see like the mouth and stuff, but Assassin's Creed has tons of graphical glitches, missing face, floating teeth, performance issues, frame drops, crashes, and numerous other technical difficulties, making it a common practice to think it's okay to just release a broken game on launch. Watch Dogs was another example of this. They suffered performance issues, frame rate drops. You seeing a trend here? Apparently with Watch Dogs, there was a big uproar because in the E3 conference reveal for Watch Dogs, the game looked very different there than it did when what people actually got. So a lot of people felt like it was fraudulent because they weren't buying the product they thought they were getting. Apparently in The Division, there was even parts of the game where people would legitimately just get stuck in the game because they couldn't progress any further. I can only imagine how annoying that was. Ubisoft faced backlash for decisions involving removal or discontinuation of DLC content that players actually paid for. here are some notable things that had happened. In July of 2022, it was reported that Ubisoft was planning on delisting Assassin's Creed Liberation HD from digital storefronts, and the game was going to be inaccessible even to people who purchased it. After a lot of backlash, they did come back and clarify that people who already own the game would be able to access it and download it, but the game would no longer be available for new purchases. So not quite there yet. But often Ubisoft, and that's kind of what prompted a lot of the conversations I've been having recently, is they've been shutting down online services and servers for older games. So I bring up The Crew a lot because I recently bought that secondhand, and turns out it doesn't even work because the server was shut down. And I'll get into that a little bit more later because there are some questionable practices happening there. But often, for older games, which often affected the DLCs with online features, once they announced they were deactivating online services for several of those games, all of those things were unplayable, meaning that people who paid for the DLC will lose access or functionality to whatever games they want to play, including Far Cry 3 or Assassin's Creed 2. Another problem that Ubisoft seems to have is they cancel a lot of games, but even more than that, they have canceled planned DLC content for their games. Ghost Recon Breakpoint had some updates that were planned, and you would think that it's not a big deal. They never made the DLC, so who cares? But if someone had purchased a game with promise of particular DLCs or particular releases in anticipation for that, then they basically bought the game and then didn't get any of the bonus content that they were promised, which you can argue that's kind of a shaky argument, but I just think Ubisoft is a shitty company. But really, guys, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think our problems are much bigger than what Ubisoft is. I think that our rights are being infringed on, and I think we do need to start taking a stance, because practices like Ubisoft and other companies are going to hurt us in the long run, and they already are hurting us. Ubisoft's just the one that brought it to my attention first. As players, we should be feeling uncertain about the longevity and continued access to content that we've actually paid for. When it comes to games or DLC that have been removed or services that have been discontinued, it feels like a breach of a purchase agreement. I haven't been able to find a lot of information, but when I was talking back, when I was saying I'll get back to The Crew, there's something called, and I might be saying this wrong, a perpetual license. And so when you buy a game, a single player game, let's go old school. I bought Dragon Age Origins for the Xbox 360. That is under a perpetual license, meaning that I hold the right to access and play that specific license on that disc and play that game whenever I want. As long as my disc and my console is working, I have a right to play that game. So the question being is what little information I could find, The Crew technically was released under that license, meaning that I should be able to still have access to that game and play it. And I don't. But then the argument is, well, they updated their terms and services, and that basically covered it. So you don't have rights to that server anymore. They shut it down. They updated that. And then there's question about the legality of the terms and services and how that trumps the original license that I bought the game under, because how would I have known back when I bought it, which, I bought The Crew recently, so not a good example, but if I had bought The Crew back when it first came out, there is nothing on the box saying you have this timeline with this license. It is a perpetual license, meaning I can play it whenever I want, and yet I can't. Do you guys see a problem with that? We should be more concerned with the legal and ethical issues here. Physical ownership is already being taken from us. Can you only imagine what they're going to do for digital? What does it mean for us when we buy the physical and digital content? And I think we need to be louder about better protections for gamers. I think we really should be concerned about physical and digital ownership, when it comes to video games and buying items, because I don't think we're protected at all, really. I think they're walking all over us and we're just letting it happen. And so I think we do need to be louder about wanting better protections for gamers and physical collectors. And I understand that physical is being phased out, and I know there's a generation that just really doesn't care at all. They buy into that subscription service where basically you pay money to not own anything, and they can take it away from you at any time, and they seem to be content with that. But I think I'd like to fight a little harder to keep my rights as a consumer and a gamer for as long as possible. So really, the purpose of this video, if you've even made it this far, is, Ubisoft is just a fracture of the problem, and we need to start speaking up for the better rights when we're spending our money on digital or physical media. When paying things for online subscription plans, they can remove a game at any time without any warning. When buying physical games, sometimes the game's not even fully on the disc, relying on these massive updates. So what happens when the day comes that I put in a disc and it's got a fraction of the game and I want to play it, and the store isn't available anymore, or the people who had the update isn't available anymore? And I'm talking like really long term, but I mean, essentially, longevity is my concern. And honestly, this has prompted a lot of questions that I think is going to go into a lot more videos, going much deeper into, physical collecting and video game preservation, but that's a video for another day. But I really wanted to open the door for us to have an open conversation about what you're thinking about the physical versus digital, what you're thinking about, what Ubisoft is doing in the practices and how they're basically just getting away with it. And what can we do to speak louder, to make our voices heard? What can we do to try to make these practices not okay? Because they're not. Hell, guys, if a bunch of moms can make the entire gaming industry flip over and basically make a rating systems because Mortal Kombat had too much violence in it, what can we do as a group of, hopefully most of us are grown adults, making noise? The internet is so much more connected than back then. So how do we make our voices heard? That's it for this kind of rant, I guess. I hope you guys like these discussion style type videos, but I truly do believe that what Ubisoft has been doing and is doing is not okay. I think we should not be buying their games. I think we should make them aware that we're tired of their crap and we don't want companies like them peddling out the garbage that they have been. I mean, if I have to say it again, obviously their games are pretty repetitive, It's a lot of rinse and repeat, so better games that are actually on the disc, understanding our rights as gamers, which if you haven't gathered quite yet, really isn't much of anything. I mean, we're being sold items under a license and it's a bunch of crap because they can just change it whenever they want. If they want to rip a subscription service in the middle of the month, they probably could, and they'd get away with it too. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you feel like this is a fight worth fighting? Do you think you think we even have a shot at making any noise at all? And if we are, how do we do it? Thank you guys so much for watching. And don't forget, there's a pixelated world waiting out there for you.